Hello out there. My name's Carly. I'm here from the Luminato Festival, and we're here backstage at the main stage at the Luminato Festival Hub at David Pico Square. I'm here with Patrick Watson, who will be performing here tonight at 9 p.m. And we're just here to have a chat, have a few questions. So I was actually at the Courtyard Review last night and saw you do a little small performance there. So how did you feel about that?
It was fun. We just had one mic up. You know, those nights are really fun with lots of different bands, and obviously Leslie was there for Feist, and it's really fun to see her sing. So it's kind of just something to share with a bunch of people and cause some trouble.
Yeah, it was good. It was really great to see you kind of scaled down on that in that way. But this show tonight is going to be
kind of the Antichrist of that. Yeah. It's like some 18 string ensemble with us, and we got the whole 9 yards. It's really nice. So we were really inspired by classical music, so it's really fun to be with a classical string ensemble. And it kind of brings a lot to the music, so it's really quite fun.
Great. And so is there, so you've got the big ensemble, but in terms of I know your shows are they use great use of lighting and kind of setting the atmosphere. So is that kind of the same thing that we're going to be expecting?
Well, hopefully, or we get fired, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely put a lot of love in our stage design, because when you start playing bigger shows, and people are far back, you kind of want to paint them a really beautiful picture just to watch a show, you know. And it's a smaller show, it's less important, obviously, but the bigger the show gets, especially outdoor festivals, it's really nice to set a mood that allows everybody to be in the same place. So I think that once you start playing the big shows, it becomes a really important part of your show.
Great. Well, we put out a call earlier yesterday and today asking questions from both of our fans, the fans of Patrick Watson and of the Luminato Festival. So we've got a few questions that I'll pass along to you.
Cool.
So it's interesting that you brought up classical music. So one of the questions that we got in was which classical musician inspires you the most?
Pretty much Debussy for me is Debussy's my favorite classical musician in terms of composers.
Right.
I remember when I was a kid and I was going through music history class. I was studying jazz, and I remember his music came on, and just the way he arranges his music, it almost sounds like electronic music in a way that the sound effects in his orchestrations it's kind of like, if you listen to it kind of carefully in a way of sound effects, he uses loads of sound effects in the orchestra. It's not just melodies, and so for me, it was like someone who really inspired me that way.
All right. And let me just look up the other ones here.
What do we have here?
Let's see.
Did my kids say, "Dad, did you get me a transformer?"
Here we go. And so another question kind of along the same lines is, where do you get your inspiration from when you're creating your music?
I think every album is really different, you know. I think as we wander around on tour and I wander around my neighborhood, I can kind of take little ideas and I put them in my pocket, and eventually all those ideas turn into like a dust ball strong enough for a song. So I guess I always have my ears and eyes open, just kind of, you know, ideas for songs can come from anywhere. You could be like in a taxi, and he'll have this really touching or incredible story, and you just kind of gives you a little idea you put in your pocket. And I just kind of collect all the ideas. And music, same thing. You see lots of bands and different things. You're like, that's a really beautiful idea. I'd love to incorporate that, and put it in your pocket long enough for it to form like a strange dust ball.
Like a dust bunny of creativity.
It's like when you carry too many receipts and eventually you have to organize them because you have too many receipts in your pocket. It's kind of like that. So once you have enough little dust particles in your dust ball, you can make an idea out of it.
Or even like in your own backyard.
Well, hence the title. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Another one. What's the toughest element of your job as a musician?
Ooh. Well, there's two answers. There's one in terms of just technically or physically is touring. Obviously, touring is whenever you put a record, you do you basically go on a tour for a year around the world. You know, and if you have family at home, or even if you didn't have family at home, it's just a pretty difficult lifestyle. And I know it would assume that it'd be very kind of funny and easy, but it's like you basically sit in a bus for a year.
Yeah.
And you're sitting down and you try to read as much as you can, but there's so much time where you're not doing anything. And if you're kind of an active person, it's kind of like waterboard torture. Because if you do a tour and you do 4 or 5 days where you have 14-hour drives, and you're always the same people in a small little van, I think it can be really challenging not to go completely you know. So, and you do go crazy, and it can be difficult for people not to kill each other because. So I would say from that level, that's difficult. Or another part of the question is, it's kind of interesting music business right now. Obviously our first priority is to make music as interesting as possible and make something really touching, and also trying to find your way in this kind of jungle of a music business that no formula really seems to there's no formula anymore. So you're constantly kind of reinventing the wheel in terms of how you want to release your music, when, or like do you make it a CD, do you make iTunes, you know. So I
Right.
think the job of like trying to balance making something really artistic and still be able to put food on your table is another kind of challenging thing for artists now.
Well, another question that we got in was what is, the hardest thing about creating new music and kind of pushing your music forward. So it's not only about the music, it's just the way that you put it out there.
Yeah, because you have to imagine like whatever the way you release a piece of music inspires the way you make it. It's like it's like the different stage you play on changes the way you play the music. So I think it's part of the artistic creation of your music is to think about like how am I going to give it to the people, and having like lots of ideas and new ways to go for me is probably the easiest part of my job because it's kind of a fun thing to do, and if I'm natural at anything, it's that aspect for me is a really natural and easy, effortless thing for me. So it's more just finding like where to put all these ideas, and that helps drive your creation in a way that like if you're going to make a single and release it on the internet, it's not going to be the same thing as if you put it in an album artistically, because you have a lot more room to go. You're not fighting against different songs in albums just by itself, but if you're doing an album, each arrangement is playing off the last arrangement.
Right.
So all these limitations kind of drive what you do and help guide you what you're going to do musically. So I think it's all a big kind of Play-Doh plasticine kind of formula thing. That was a terrible sentence. That made no sense.
Though I'd love to play with just like a big ball of Play-Doh right now. That seems kind of fun.
Well, every time you move something else moves, and also like the music, like nowadays, like people are really, really kind of addicted to new. So it kind of puts you in a position where you're kind of constantly reinventing. You could just say forget it and don't pay attention to it, which is probably the best idea. But for sure you're going to be affected by you're going to try to, that's a cool new sound. I like to incorporate that somehow, and the balance between not incorporating it too much and remaining like keeping your past strong, so you don't just be like a band that follows the trends, or you just be yourself. So all these things come into play, and it's tough to to find your integrity in that whole thing. But I think that these are all different kind of challenges for like a musician.
Right. To go back to the touring aspect that you were talking about before, you said that try to read a lot. So I assume that there's a lot of books whenever you go touring.
It's really hard. It's so weird. You watch a lot of HBO too.
Oh yeah. Well, that's not a bad way to spend time.
Well, yeah, I know. Like, I think we're like the experts of TV series, just because you have to sit and answer. It's the only thing that maybe save you on a long drive is like a good Game of Thrones episode, but, or Homeland. But I think the winner of this year was Homeland for us in the van. I think that was the winner of the series, of all the series.
Oh yeah.
And Archer's hilarious.
Oh yeah.
So, and books, I just finally read The Great Gatsby. That's an amazing book. I never read it before. It's stupid. I'm not a very good reader, but finally, I plowed through the book, and that was really fun.
Have you seen the movie yet?
No, that's why, because I started reading it and I saw there was a movie coming out. I better read it before I start seeing Leonardo DiCaprio and ruining the book. So I tried to focus and finish it properly.
Well, one of the questions we got in through Twitter was, is there something that you always have to bring on tour with you? Is there one thing that you always need to have with you?
I usually have a lucky hat that's usually important for me. It keeps my brains in my head. It's a pretty important thing.
Is that the hat?
Well, for now, yeah. They change every 2 years, and this one's getting a little tired. So
is 2 years the lifespan of luck for your hats?
Well, I think I just wear them all the time, so eventually they just fall apart every 2 years. They can't really physically last longer than 2 years when I wear them. But I think that for me, a good hat and a good pair of shoes to keep you going is something. And obviously you got to bring something to communicate with people. That's important. But that's something that seems like when I leave, I got to make sure I don't forget my hat, or I'll be really deeply upset.
Right.
I'm a little superstitious, but I think everybody has their little things they bring with them. I mean, I guess bringing your patience is probably the biggest thing to bring on a tour.
Right, for yourself and for the people around you.
Yeah, it's a very. You'd have to think of it as like a nowhere land. I can't describe it any other as if time erases. There's no tomorrow. There's no yesterday. Your home starts getting fuzzy the farther you go, and you kind of it would seem awkward to be at home. So you kind of go into nowhere land a bit, and it's kind of a strange feeling that it just feels like you're kind of wandering.
Right.
And the more you tour, the more the wander, and the less you can remember where you live.
So right now we're not at David Pico Square in Toronto. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere land.
Yeah, I don't even look. It's funny. Sometimes you're in the most beautiful city, and you don't even look around. You're just kind of where you are, which is kind of really great for amount of time, and then after a year you start being oh boy, this is kind of weird.
So where are you headed after this?
I go to Montreal for Jazz Fest.
Okay.
Then I go to France. We're doing all the festivals in France.
Oh wow, that's great.
Should be good.
Now on to another question.
So I'm just gonna cook. Hold on.
Sure.
I'll be right back.
Hot drink break.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Okay. If music didn't exist, what would you be doing?
I really love science.
Oh yeah.
I like science just because it's probably, out of all the fields, probably the most artistic, in a weird way, one of the most artistic fields in the modern world. Is because the more you read up about science, the more like music seems super straight. Like some of the theories they're working on are so beyond your imagination that it kind of seems like a very inspiring field. Like even just the idea of like the 3D printing and all these things that are printing like liver cells, and it's just so far beyond what you actually imagine, or quantum mechanics. Like for me, that's kind of almost like an art form. It seems really artistic and really inspires me a lot, actually. And I try to keep up as much as I can with science news, because for me, it's like I find it almost comforting, you know, like the more we like listen to the news, right now it seems like it's like we're in the dinosaur age, and just it seems like it's always the same problems repeating. And for me, it gives me a little exit where it like takes a break from where the world's at and where it could be. So for me, I find it really optimistic and gives me a lot of hope when I read about science.
Right. Oh, I see the similarities that you like, the constant experimenting, the trying to do things that haven't been done before.
Well, I think it's just like the actual equations. Like a quantum mechanics for me is one of the weirdest things I've ever, like, it makes Weird Al Yankovic look like a business banker, you know, like it's so bizarre that I don't think any of our, you know, even if you like silly questions like you ask, like how big is it? I know they're everybody asks a question, but how big are things? And you just, it's mind numbing, you know. So for me, it's like it's the thing that gives me a break from music is science. It really like inspires me a lot. And it's not easy to sing about though, so I don't.
Right.
It doesn't sound good in lyrics, but Björk does it. I mean, most of Björk's music I think is very inspired by science. So.
Right.
But her voice can just she can own it. So.
It's funny. Another question we actually got in was, what planet out of all the planets, what would you go to?
Oh, they were talking about the planet with two suns recently. That seems so. I can't imagine what it'd be like. There's an exoplanet they found with two suns that could be hostile. It could carry life, and I just kind of. Can you imagine having two suns? It'd be amazing. Or you know, you can't really go to Jupiter because it's just clouds. But I'd love to go on one of the moons. It looks stunning. You know.
One of the moons?
I think you couldn't live on Jupiter, so the only place you can live on is the moon.
Oh, one of the moons around Jupiter to have that view.
Yeah, that would be a nice view, I think.
I understand that. Yeah, I get that.
Crazy storming planet. That would be nice.
What's the best moment of your day?
And on tour or normal life?
Let's go normal life.
Dropping my kids off at daycare.
Oh yeah?
I love it. No, they're so cute. Or picking them up's even better. They're like, Papa! Like no matter what you've done, they're like, Ma! You're like, they're your biggest fans. I used to be a night person, and my whole thing switched to the morning. I love like when I just start my day and I have all these ideas and there's all these things you can do in the day. This is the morning when you it's that, I don't know, that feeling of like you have a whole day in front of you and you can play piano all day and write music, and that makes me really excited. I like that part of the day.
Right. That sounds pretty ideal. Let's see. What is your favorite childhood moment and how has it affected your life today?
My favorite childhood moments would be, that's a big question.
Yeah, on a Thursday afternoon.
Well, recently I was talking about this. Like when I was a kid, I used to take the train every morning for 45 minutes to go to school, and we would in those days. Well, I guess the train's still there, but it was open, and we'd go through the woods for the first 20 minutes, and you could kind of hang your legs out of the train and kind of watch the world go by. And they're some of my favorite moments ever. Probably like a landslide. Like it's nothing like being on a train, sticking your head out and hanging out of the train and just in the middle of the woods. So I think that was something that, I don't know, it's really just that feeling I think really inspired me. Probably still this day musically, like, even when I see train tracks, I go hard to I smell the smell. And so I guess for me that would be something that I have great memories of.
Has that ever worked its way into your music?
For sure.
In what ways?
The thing about train tracks, even when you're walking them, it's like there's certain momentum and you kind of just, it's really strange. It just kind of puts you in this strange daydream, and I think that trains really kind of gave birth to my daydreaming.
Oh, right.
So, which I guess plays a huge part of my music.
And another question we got was about the movie that you wrote the music for. The
new one?
Let's see. C'est pas moi, je le jure.
Okay, what'd they ask?
What was that experience like, and how has it affected your music now?
Well,
working with the children?
I score like a film a year. It could be a short film. Like the last film I did was like a stop animation film, and it's a very weird one by these two guys from the Clyde Henry brothers, and they make these crazy stop animations. It's about an astronaut, a woman who's basically having an erotic dream with like Jim Henson looking creatures, and it was probably the funnest thing I've ever done in my life. And for sure, like when you do scores, because you're not thinking about me, you're just thinking about kind of giving like an emotion, or you're kind of like almost like a technician. Like sometimes you allow yourself to write better music because you're not attaching yourself, or your ego's disappeared. And sometimes really good for me to just step out of my own skin and write from an exterior point of view, and it usually gives me a lot of ideas. So that's why I try to score at least a film a year, because it always really helps me do that.
How long have you been doing that then? When did you start scoring films?
You know, since the beginning, like as long as I can remember, I was doing like my first albums on a book, or just like short films from directors around. And you know, I did Simple Match de Jour. I did an Israeli film called oh god, I just forgot, Mabul. I've done all sorts of different films. They're not like crazy, huge, famous films or nothing, but they were good. Now I start to get films I like more and more, obviously, because I guess my career goes better. But I had a lot of practice leads, so I think when I get a score I'm going to dream of, I think that I'll be practiced, and I would have done enough scores that I have a good idea how to do it.
What's that score that you dream of?
Well, a long version of the film I just did. I'm a really big fan of science fiction. But not like science fiction like everything's weird. I like when science fiction is like, you know, for example, Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. Like, in a way that it's still like a very grounded story. It's like our breakup story, but just told with this strange twist. But it's always has its feet on the ground, as crazy as it gets. And I really love when science fiction walks that line and always holds the tension of like something you can believe in and something super weird at the same time. And like a film like Donnie Darko was another one I loved. Like that would be my ideal score, or something I would love to score.
Like Pan's Labyrinth or something.
But see, yeah, Pan's Labyrinth would be fun. It's still a film that goes like way into like fantasy, which I like as well. But my favorite pieces of art is when they walk that line, like, and it's just, you know, like the old Twilight Zone's really great for that. I remember this one episode. It's about this guy, this old man with glasses, and he's always working at his job, and he likes to read books. Like he loves reading books, and his boss always catches him, and because he gets in trouble. So one day he goes and hides in the vault to read his book, and when he opens the vault, there had been this kind of explosion. Everybody's gone. So he's like, now I have all the time in the world to read the books I want. So he goes to the library, and he leans over to pick up the book, and his glasses fall off and break. And it's kind of like a weird science fiction, but it's also kind of really touching and kind of straight and kind of strange at the same time. I love when people find a way of combining those kind of writing techniques, where it's just kind of super surreal and super straight. For me, it's the best.
Well, I think...
Well, Twin Peaks is like that.
Right,
even like original Twin Peaks, it's like a lot of it's like sometimes like a soap opera and a normal thing, and then it goes really out, but then it goes right back to normal land. And I love stuff that can do that. It's really tough to write, though. It's not easy to make.
Is Twin Peaks another show that you guys kind of have
when I was a kid, yeah, we
of
did.
Touring?
I think everybody has. I mean, we did that with my first apartment. We were 18, 19. We moved out. We watched Twin Peaks. And I go, whoa, Bob! You know, that was a very inspiring thing.
Well, I think that's all the time that we have. But thanks so much for joining us, Patrick.
My pleasure.
We're
Bye,
so excited
everybody.
to see you tonight at 9 o'clock.
Right on.
Bye.
Bye.